Thank you, Misty. We are honored to be here. What a joy to come and to share our Cinderella story with you. Greenville is, as Misty said, a small community in the western part of the state. It's a rural community. If you want to work on the geography side of it, it's about 90 miles due north of Nashville, Tennessee, and that is in the very heart of western Kentucky. The county is Muhlenberg, just to help you get a little bit of reference point. Fame to claim would be the Everly brothers are from our county. So if some of you know the Everly brothers, for those that are of a younger generation, if you watch the movie The Titanic, that beautiful flute solo on the bow of the ship was played by one of our countyans who now lives in California and plays for the Philharmonic there. So we're delighted to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I want you to know that as we share with you today, we're not trying to brag. We really aren't. We're amazed at what's happened in the last 11 years, and we're just honored to come and to share our story with you. I'm going to start with the fact that about 12 years ago, a gentleman walked in my office at the Garden Center where I had just sold my business about a year and a half earlier and said, "I'm running for office for the mayor." He was a retired state policeman, and he said the existing or the current city administrator is 75, and he told me whoever was going to be the mayor that he would be retiring, and as they came in the door, he'd be walking out. And he said, "Somebody told me you'd be a good city administrator." And I laughed at him and said, "I don't know who you've been talking to. You might want to check your sources." And he said, "No, I'm serious about that." And I said, "Well, let me say this. Before I give you an answer, I've got to pray about it, because I don't do anything without God's leadership." And I said, "Let me pray about it." And he said, "I'll check back with you." And about a month later, he came back. He was in his campaign mode, said, "Have you got an answer?" And I said, "No, I'm still praying." 2 months came by, and he said, "Have you got an answer for me?" I said, "I'm sorry, I'm still praying about it." What he didn't know was that I was asking God to say no. And God wouldn't say no to me. And so as we got within a couple of weeks of the election, he came back a third time, and I said, "Well, I think I have an indication of what I need to tell you, and that is that God has not said no, and he's really impressing it upon me. I need to take a step of faith." So with fear and trembling, I will tell you that if they should hire me as your city administrator, I will accept the position, but I'll be holding my breath that I don't want to embarrass you and my family and my God in the process, because I know nothing about government work. Anyway, that's where we started. He hired me on the second day of his new mayoralship, and I met with him about a week later. We sat down in my office, and he said, "Well, what's your thinking?" And I said, "Well, what are you thinking?" He said, "Well, all I know is I'm here for 4 years, and I want to leave this city better than I found it." And I said, "That's my heart's desire as well. I want to leave it better than I found it." And how did we find it? I grew up in that town. That was my hometown. I was born there. And over the years, I'd seen our city decline, a city of 4,400. We were the county seat. But over the years, what used to be a Saturday night was alive when I was a teenager, and everybody came to town and visited with their community. But now I was seeing the sidewalks roll up on Friday evening, and everybody went to the mall and about 60 miles away to a bigger city and did their shopping, and the community would die on weekends. We had no activities, nothing going on. Storefronts were in bad shape, and many storefronts were empty. We had dangerous sidewalks. We had telephone poles with wires swinging through town, and the stoplight was swinging on a wire, and cracked sidewalks, no ADA compliance at all, and it was pretty sad. And we said, "Well, we've got to do something." And I said, "Well, Mayor, the unfortunate thing for me is that I've looked at the budgets and the audits, and best I can tell, we're in deficit spending. We want to leave it better than we found it, but we don't have any money." And he said, "Well, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll call the Kentucky League of Cities and see if a couple of those guys will come down and meet with us." They came and met, and that gentleman said, "Well, you've got two options. You can write grants." By the way, I'd never seen one, never written one. "Secondly, you can pass a tax. This is a new mayor coming into office, and somebody's telling him to pass a tax. After we heard that, and it was a restaurant tax, and after we heard that, we came back the next week and sat down and talked about what we'd heard. And he said, I'm not running again. 4 years is max for me, and so if I have to make some hard decisions, I don't have to worry about being reelected, and I want to do what we can do to make this city better, and if it means taxes, let's do it. And I said, I'll tell you what, we'll do that. And I noticed when I came to work that first day, and by the way, before I went, I looked in the Bible and was praying to God to not let me embarrass him or myself. And God gave me a promise in Psalms that he would bless me. And I wrote the date in there. It was 2007. So I noticed when I came to work that first day that this sign that you see on the screen was up there. Don't tell me why we can't, tell me how we can. And that was the mayor's motto as he came in, and he put it up over the council room wall, and it's there to this day. And that was the philosophy that we went with. We weren't going to take no for an answer. We would work around things if we had to, but we wanted to make it better if we could. And so that was the motto we lived with. I want you to know that in 11 short years, we've raised outside of our general fund over $8 million. This is a community, this is a community of 4,400 people, and we needed money to leave it better than we found it, and we managed, with God's blessings, to raise over $8 million. Now, how did we do that? Well, you're going to see that next. There was principally 3 areas. We wrote grants, and I'm going to mention that in a moment. We formed a tourism commission and passed a tax. And then thirdly, unexpectedly, after these things happened and things started happening in our community, we found out that we had partnerships that were made available to us and contributions or donations, which came as a total surprise to us. I will mention those at the very end. But that's the 3 legs of funding that we had to do the things that you're going to see today. And we're going to move through a lot of slides. On the grant side, I had never seen a grant. I looked in the file and looked at that grant and put it back and never touched it because it was not impressive at all. And I called an engineer and said, bring me a grant that's been successful that I can look at. The engineer brought us one from a adjoining county. I looked at it and said, I think I can do this. And with the help of our area development district, who looked over my shoulder, I wanted to write grants that would rise above the others that I was competing with. So I worked really hard to make them stand out. And over a period of 11 years, the beginning of that, the first year we wrote 3 grants, 2 big ones and 1 little one. At the end of the time of the grading of those grants, we only got 2 out of the 3. And they were the big grants. The only grant we didn't get was a land and water grant, which was to put some permanent bathrooms in the city park. And I did my best to get that one to pass too. I named it Operation Park Relief. We didn't get that one. But about a year and a half later, we got it by just simply a phone call. Said, we've had money come back in. Would you like to do that grant? We got all 3 of them. But the culture of writing grants and getting money caught fire with all of our departments, our fire department, our police department, and we then started looking for other grants. This is a list of them. The EDA grant, coal severance grants, T21 was streetscape projects. We're on our 3rd streetscape project beginning in March. We'll do construction. We had all safe routes to school. Those were 100% grants back in the day, and we did 2 of those, but we transformed our city with all of the money that was coming in. It was pretty amazing. Also, you'll look at the bottom, and the other sources of money was that we passed that tax, and there was a tourism tax that was coming in, and Jamie's going to speak to that in just a few minutes, and then the private donations. But that's kind of giving you an idea of how the funding that shares our Cinderella story. This is what you want to see happen in your community. You want to see the mayor there with a ceremonial check. That one's for over $400,000. The mayor at that time, the state representative, the state senator, some of our council members, but this is what you want to see happen. The only way it's going to happen is for you to write grants and do your very best to let those grants rise above the others as you're competing for monies. But that's the beginning of an exciting time. I'm going to give you a few quick short before and after shots of our streetscape project. Most of you are familiar with those. Our downtown was in pretty deplorable, pretty sad state. This was at the main stoplight. That was our non-ADA compliant steps right at the main stoplight in town. And after we started our streetscape project, this is how that looked. We corrected that eyesore and the lack of accessibility. Another shot of downtown. This is coming in from the south end of town, and this was what was the welcome mat for the south end of town. It was dangerous, it was two-tiered, and it was not inviting whatsoever, even had broken sidewalks. After we started with phase one, this is what it looked like. We put in retaining walls in front of the Presbyterian Church. We put in basket weave brick along the curb. By the way, while we were doing that, we decided that we wanted to make it a nostalgic stroll, so we had our library to research every business address in the town and give us the names of businesses that have ever been in that particular building. And then we engraved bricks that we put in strategically in front of those buildings. And our senior citizens especially loved walking through town. Oh yes, I forgot that little restaurant was there. But this is what that looked like. We had a crosswalk. That's what it looked like, but it actually ran at a 45-degree angle and ran up behind some cars. It went nowhere. After we did that phase one, we put in a stamped brick, which is a concrete, but it looked like brick, that led into a Veterans Mall area between the courthouse and the Judicial Center. Much more attractive, much more up to date. So that's our downtown. I'm going to give you a long picture of the downtown in just a moment. We actually did 2 phases, and we're on our 3rd phase right now that will begin in March. This was a street that ran from our elementary school to our middle school, no sidewalks. Kids literally walked in the street to be able to get from one school to the other to get from their home. And after we got that first Safe Routes to School grant, we put in a sidewalk that led all the way from one end to the other and gave our kids safe passage there. This is making a picture from one end. This is from the middle school perspective of that same sidewalk. And there's what it looked like. They were made in the wintertime, so the grass is not green, but again, providing safe passage for our kids. This is another section of a neighborhood in town. Can you see that sidewalk? No. Barely. But after we did our Safe Routes to School and in our 2nd grant of Safe Routes to School, we were able to add some very safe walks in our communities as well. So the results of our downtown, you're going to get a better perspective of what it looks like after our streetscape projects. What you'll see there are new sidewalks, the basket weave brick, new historic lights. You don't see any telephone poles. You see no wires swinging in town. I will tell you that when we got rid of the telephone poles, the street literally looked twice as wide as it did with the poles there. I mean, it was like, wow, this place is big when it felt so small. We also, and Jamie can mention about the clock when she gets into her presentation, but we also put in a historic clock along with what the courthouse clock at the top of the dome was. But this is a drone shot of our downtown after that streetscape project. Keep in mind that everything I'm sharing with you has happened in the last 11 years. It didn't look like this beforehand, but this is an aerial shot of the Veterans Mall area and the courthouse itself and all the new lights. We'll tell you, after we did phase one, the judge executive was so impressed with the courthouse, he said, we're about to see this courthouse condemned because of the leaking, and you've inspired us. We're going to bite the bullet and do a remodel of our courthouse. And this is literally after the remodeling of that courthouse after our phase one. It was a $9 million project, and that dome is the largest open belfry dome in the United States. So it was a shame for us to think about having to tear that down. But that's our downtown. Now I'm going to pause the grant side of things. I want to talk to you for a second about the tourism tax. This new mayor said we're going to go ahead and take our chances as a new mayor, and we're going to try to pass a tax. And I said, Mayor, I'll be happy to work with you on that, but there's 2 things we've got to do if we're going to do that. First of all, we've got to go to those who are going to collect that tax, to every restaurant, and get their support privately before we go public with it. because they're going to collect the tax. We'll have to explain to them that it's not going to cost them. It's a 3% tax in Kentucky. I don't think yours is but a 1%. Ours is a 3%. And I said, well, we got to convince them that they're not going to pay for that tax. All they do is collect it for us and turn it in once a month. And I said, if we can get their support, and we, by the way, had 15 restaurants, if we can get their support, then we will go to the public. We got their support, but there was one. 0 minutes. Okay. Thank you. After we got their support, then we went public with the community. We put a full-page ad in, and all those things listed there are things that we pledged to do with the money. And so we literally made a pledge. We had a public hearing. We had zero support, opposition to that new tax and that tourism commission. And then we went out and picked some people to serve on that tourism commission at no expense, because they're going to volunteer their labor. And Jamie Wells was new in the community, and our mayor said, we'd like for you to be our chairperson for that tourism commission. And we were fortunate enough for her to say yes. And I'm going to have Jamie come and share with you. We have 7 on that tourism commission, along with their families and wives who help us. We appointed, they were city appointed, city supported, and then they operate autonomous from the city budget. They have their own budget, and they get 0 pay. Jamie gets 0 pay, and they do have 1 paid staff member, a director. But I'm going to turn it over to Jamie. She's going to tell you what we did with the tourism dollars. By the way, we had 0 money starting, and now we have a stream of revenue, both grants and with tourism. Jamie?
Thank you, Ben. We need to do a switcheroo for our friend down there. So when you come to North Carolina, you learn a lot. I've learned that. One of the things that I learned last night, can you guys hear me okay? One of the things I learned last night was that it's not North Carolinians. I always thought it was North Carolinians. I looked over at Chris, who was sitting at our table, and I said, North Carolinian? Isn't it L-I-N-A? We're Kentuckians. So isn't it North Carolinians? No, that doesn't even feel right to say. He said it's North Carolinians, and I said, well, I'm learning that very quickly. Another thing that I learned when I came to North Carolina is that you can say things here that you can't say in Kentucky. And, you know, when this says that there are 7 committed, passionate citizens in their families, there's nothing that could be more true. We look for folks who we can get package deals with. So the husband and the wife and maybe the kids can come along and help. And certainly Sharon Van Hooser, Ben's wife, is here and a huge supporter. She's the lovely lady in orange in the back. And my husband is absolutely, I don't know what I would do without him. I heard, I guess was it Billy Ray that mentioned last night about his wife? I'm going to give Stephen an opportunity to say something like that about me at this moment. Actually, I'm just kidding, but what you can say in North Carolina that you cannot say in Kentucky is, Stephen, I want you to stand up, and you are looking at the only surviving Duke fan that lives in Kentucky. I can't say that at home, but I can say that here. We're glad to do that. So I do want to talk about the Tourism Commission and what we've done as a commission. And I don't know if you've ever heard of someone called Simon Sinek or Sidik. Some people pronounce it differently. He has a great TED Talk available, and he talks about the why. And the one thing that I want to say to you all first and foremost is that we need to understand our why. So I'm going to compartmentalize what we're going to talk about in relation to the Tourism Commission and what we've been able to do in partnership with the city by doing it first in talking about our why it is that we do what we do. People don't really care how we do what we do or what it is that we do. What is fueling our passion and our mission, and I've heard this in many speakers over the last couple of days, is the why we do what we do. So we'll first talk about the why, then we will talk about the how, and then we'll get down and talk a little bit about the what that the Tourism Commission does. So let's start with the why, and if I get through this slide without getting emotional, it'll be a miracle. These are in no particular order, or maybe they are. Maybe they start at the bottom and go back up to the top. But what I'd like for you to do is I'd like to know how much we have in common with you all in Greenville, Kentucky. And many people have thought we're from Greenville, North Carolina. From Greenville, Kentucky, what do we have in common? So the why of what we do in relation to the Tourism Commission and the partnership with the city, first on the list, just first bullet point, is to fuel, foster, and support economic development. So if this is something that is also important in your community, I'd like to see that by a show of hands. We need jobs, we need merchants, we need downtown businesses, we need help with the economy downtown. So let me see those hands if that resonates with you and your community. We have that in common. I've heard the second bullet point so many times over the last couple of days, and that is we would like to have a place for our kids to come home to. Now listen, nobody prompted us what to say in this. Misty, thank you for having us. You can attest to this. But when we get here and we see so many of these things that we've heard this morning and yesterday afternoon, we have this in common too. Do you guys want a place for your kids to come back home to and have a job to come back to? It's a safe place to raise a family. There's a great educational system. We have relationships. We heard our pastors talking about the importance of one-on-ones and relationships. Well, we want a place for our kids to come back home to. Anybody else want that? Yes, that's right. So the third bullet point is to perpetuate and honor the past. We have a lot of great things that we can honor about the past in the form of preservation, but we're looking through the windshield mirror, not the rear view mirror. The windshield is bigger than the rear view mirror for a reason. So we also want to improve the now and the quality of life. That's important to economic development for sure. And we want to create a better future. We've heard the word legacy probably 10 times already this morning. The purest form of the why for the Greenville Tourism Commission is to develop and promote Greenville as a destination location. We'd like to have people come over. We've heard hospitality today. In fact, if you've ever taken a spiritual gift analysis, one of my spiritual gifts is hospitality. I'm a banker. Bankers and hospitality, that goes right hand in hand, doesn't that? Not always, but anyway. When I retire, I want to own a bed and breakfast. So we want people to come to Greenville, and then we want to be able to bring them back. That's going to depend upon the experience that they have. And then lastly, and I honestly, I put this in here. I didn't know a thing about this organization other than what I had learned from Misty, who, by the way, you guys should count your blessings for. What a great leadership development director you guys have. Huge blessing. Great job, Misty. I thought, I'm going to go there. I don't know how it'll be received, but I'm going to go there. And I said, Ben, I'm going to go there. But why we do what we do and everything we do is to be an inclusive community that honors God. And what I mean by that is we don't care who gets the credit. We want everyone around the table, but we want to make sure that God gets the glory for what we do. I made it through without crying. Aren't you proud of me? That's the why. The how we do what we do, other than our human capital, is that we are funded by a 3% restaurant tax and a 1% hotel tax. I know that works a little differently here in your state. That's how it works for us here at home in Kentucky. What that means is that my job is to get cheeks in the seats and heads in the beds. Cheeks in the seats of the restaurants eating, heads in the beds of the hotels staying over. Since our inception, we've had almost $3 million in revenue, tax revenue from the tourism tax. In the first year, we had $263,000. Last fiscal year, we had $357,000 in tax revenue from the tourism tax. That's a 78% increase. I got on my tiptoes when I said that. It's a 78% increase. And I know we're in a big group, but somebody tell me, why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? What happened to have such a huge increase in our revenue? Any ideas? Became a destination, right? And what did they do when they came? They ate. What's another element that might have fueled that increase? More restaurants, more places to stay, because there was more hope and more confidence in our community. Hey, that things are happening. They're not just talking about things happening. Things are really happening, and we're going to invest in this community with a business. Generally, we have two buckets within our budget. We have $75,000 in capital projects annually, and about $200,000 in event-oriented projects. The capital projects have to happen before the tourism event-related projects. But we have about a $350,000 annual budget. I tell you that for two reasons. We have a $350,000 budget. Yeah. Woo-hoo. The second reason I tell you that is to go, we have a $350,000 budget. Now that first $350,000 that I referenced, that exciting version of that, is because 11 years ago, that number was goose egg. That's exciting. When I go, ooh, we have a $350,000 budget. That's because people around us, like Lexington, Kentucky, like Louisville, Kentucky, like Paducah, like Nashville, Tennessee. We're an hour and a half from Nashville, Tennessee. That's our competition in relation to where tourism dollars go. $350,000 is a drop in the bucket to what they have. So we have to do everything right with our dollars and be very fiscally responsible. Moving into the capital projects, then there are two I want to focus on today. We do several things such as landscaping. We pay for the landscaping around our community, the flowers in the pots, etc. When we need outdoor furniture and fixtures to fix things up, we provide the funding for that. Those historic light pole banners that you saw, we pay for those. We change those out seasonally. I'll show you a picture of that in a moment. Any general marketing that we do for our city, whether it's a rack card or a brochure, web design, etc., we pay for that. And other improvements, such as restored neon, when we need matching funds for things that Ben has going on. We do some monument work and speakers. We do that. Two I want to talk about today that were transformational for us, that had to happen before we could have these events, are Let's Paint the Town and the awning and sign grants. So the first assignment that I made to the Greenville Tourism Commission when I came on as the chairperson 10 years ago, I guess almost 11 in December, was, now, I wasn't from there. So when I moved there, it was a big change for me. So the first thing I challenged all of the folks who are on my commission who are natives was to go to all points from outside of the county and to drive into our city and look at it with fresh eyes. Look at it as if they had never seen it before, and they were looking with what I call visitor eyes. And it's not just what we see, it's how what we see makes us feel, especially in hospitality. If you ever walked into that hotel room, opened the door, took a big whiff, shut the door back, and walked away, said, I want another room? It's how that made us feel. So, not only to go out and write down what do you see, but how does that make you feel? It was an eye-opening, pun intended, experience. Let me give you a little glimpse of what they saw with fresh eyes. This is the first street you see on Main Street, coming from the south to the north. First building on the left. What does that make? How does that make you feel when you see that? What words come to mind? Anything good? No. So, peeling, neglected, deprived, abandoned. What do you see in the window? For sale. It's over. Here's another one. So we got the bright idea in the 70s that leisure suits looked good. So on many of our historic buildings, and this may be true in your community or maybe in the past has been, we decided to put a leisure suit on our downtown buildings. Right? It's metal wrapping there, the siding. There's actually 3 buildings behind that. And if you can notice, one has sort of a makeshift shop, and the other 2 are completely empty. How does that make you feel? If you drive in as a visitor, do you want to stick around? How do you feel if you're wanting to put in a new restaurant or a new shop? You want to go in that building? Not so much. So you see the old you see the old signs from the businesses that were there in the past that haven't been there for many years. Look at those sidewalks before Ben got a hold of them. There's some leaning pole there. I guess it had a sign on it at some point. I have no idea what that's about. And you see those lovely metal awnings. So much charm. Man, what great color taste we have. I call this margarita green and flamingo pink. That's underneath, again, a sign that was painted on a building many years ago. That was a restaurant that was there long before I came to town, hadn't been to town in a long time. And you also see that there is a residential door, screen door, on the front of this commercial building. Want to put your next business there? Listen, I'm not being critical of the merchants. They were doing with what they had. But it was our mission to come along and help them do better now that we knew better. This building, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about. It doesn't look too shabby after seeing those other ones, does it? Looks pretty darn good. Sidewalks still look pretty bad. Ben hadn't gotten a hold of them yet. We see those metal awnings, a little dirty, maybe, but not terrible. So what we knew, WPA building. Anyone have a WPA building in your community? Was that a federal program? Yes. Hey, very functional. That's our police department in Greenville. We'll come back to that as well. So once we saw what we had to see, and we saw it with fresh eyes, and we realized and we captured how that made us feel, and we thought how a visitor or a new considering business might feel, we knew we had to do something. So we did this capital project, and it was underwritten by the Greenville Tourism Commission called Let's Paint the Town. And that just sounds fun, doesn't it? Anybody paint the town last night? I don't want to know. But we knew we had to do 5 things. We had to wake up, we had to put up, we had to show up, we had to roll up, clean up, and spruce up, and we have to keep up still. Sometimes we have to shut up. Just shut up. Sometimes we screwed up. Sorry, pastors. Sometimes we screwed up. But I tell you one thing, we never gave up. We never gave up. I don't have enough time to unpack each one of these 5 steps, but if you're interested in learning more, we'll be around afterward, or we'd love to talk to you beyond the conference. But Wake Up is just to have this honest awareness. Get the stakeholders together, whether it's a business, a building owner, or if it's the city, the people in the city city council, etc., and cast the vision of what it could look like. Under the put up, we had to help with some money for these folks. These merchants are barely making it. These building owners sometimes are absent. So what we did was we said, we'll supply the paint, we'll supply the paint brushes, the buckets, the stirrers. We'll provide any equipment we need. If we need scissor lifts, that sort of thing. And we arranged for a discount for the paint for the merchants. That's the only thing they had to pay for. And it was at a reduced price. Show up was to rally the group. All of this labor was voluntary. What I've learned is if you want volunteers to show up, provide some food and a t-shirt. Under 4, where we had to roll up our sleeves, we had to clean up our buildings, and we had to spruce them up. And it works when we do. And then it's not a one and done. Every year we put about $10,000 in our budget to keep this project going. So let me show you some quick pictures of the process. The lady with the hat on to the left, she's got that fake fur on top of her head. You ever seen one of those visors? She was going through chemotherapy. There every time. The gentleman on the right is our state representative, and the man up in the bucket truck, which we provided, that's our president of our economic development office. Folks came from all walks of life, and some of these things were above our head. We had contractors that we asked to volunteer because we didn't know all that we needed to know structurally. They volunteered their time. The scaffolding was provided there, some of the material that you see. So you want to see the results? Yeah. Okay. Oh, remember that building? Listen, this is a whole family. That's a roofer, his wife, his 3 kids, and the person with the broad backside on the far right clinging to the brick because she's afraid of heights is me. Truth. Ask Stephen. That backside, that's Ben. What we learned in one case was we didn't need to put paint on, we need to take paint off. When we took paint off of this one, had copper trim and tile. Shazam. I've said that to you twice today. All right, remember this beauty? Mm-hmm. So this is what she looked like after. Yeah. What's different? Let me say it this way, what's the same? Nothing. You see, it's occupied by a business as well. One of our most thriving shops downtown is in this building today. Remember our leisure suit? What we discovered was there were painted advertisements on these buildings. So you also see they're all 3 occupied now, 2 restaurants and a gift shop. Today, there are 2 restaurants and a gift shop right in this section. Those are those 3 buildings behind the leisure suit. Those advertisements that we restored, the older folks in our community were so thrilled to see those again. It was almost like they'd forgotten about them. That one on the far right, Pastor, none better, flour. I got in a bucket truck and I got up there and I like to paint. I'm an artist and I painted that. Kentucky Monthly Magazine came and did a story on us while I was up there doing that. In the next edition of the Kentucky Monthly, they had put it in the middle of the magazine. Pastor, it was the first and last time I ever been a centerfold. True story.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord.
Whoop, whoop. Let me say it's contagious. This gentleman who owned this building said, I don't need you to do it. I don't need the free labor of the community. I don't need the discount pay. I'm going to take care of it myself. And he did. Better, huh? He took advantage of our awning grant. We'll pay half up to $2,000 for a cloth awning for any downtown merchant. If they don't want an awning, we'll pay half of a sign up to $2,000. He did take advantage of that and has these much more charming awnings. Oh yeah, there I am. Remember that building? It's the one behind the red SUV. Teddy Bear Brown is the name of that color. That was 10 years ago. 8 years ago maybe now, and I still remember the name of that paint. Cloth awning. You can also see that all of the buildings there, with the exception of the one on the far left, and we've got that in our targets, had some influence from Let's Paint the Town. The Palace Theater that you see on the right, we did Let's Paint the Town there. We restored that neon. That neon sign had been long gone. We had a reproduction made, and there it is. Here it is at night. Nice. Think people like that? Yeah. Yes. Oh, there's that WPA building. Ben, you want to tell them how that came about?
We had someone who worked for Sherman-Williams, and they donated all the materials and got us a discount on the paint, and we had inmates to paint the building. So we had 0 cost in this restoration.
Inmates can't paint privately owned property, but they can that, and this is what happened. How about them apples? That's fresh. Listen, if you got to go to the police department, don't you want it to look like that? Right now, underway, our library downtown is going through a complete restoration. Not any part of Let's Paint the Town, but the momentum is still going. It's contagious. Here's one of those downtown banners and those speakers. We provided speakers for our downtown poles, and they play Sirius Radio 24/7 around our square. People like that. I'm going to show you some of the events that we do. I've heard several of you say that you guys have free concert series. We started, this year will be our 10th, and we've grown off of the Veterans Plaza to where we've had to close Main Street. I want you to look to the left on this slide and see what you see is a new construction. Someone had confidence enough now to put a new construction downtown. It's a pharmacy with a restaurant. That makes me really happy. Amazes me how these people can line their chairs up so straight. Isn't that pretty? This was this past year. We had a few people, but we cleaned up our house. We weren't going to have a party with our bed unmade. So we made our bed and we cleaned up our house. Here's a hot air balloon event. We've done 4 of these. People love hot air balloons. They're so pretty. I'm in that basket. Stephen's in that basket. Remember, I'm afraid of heights. We do in the fall, we do a fall arts bazaar and a fall festival and arts bazaar where we celebrate the performing and visual arts. This past year we had 125 artisans on our square. We have activities for the kids, and it's grown into an amazing event. We do a lot of other events. We don't have time to go into that, but let me leave you with this before we start talking about donations very quickly, is to find your why first. And when we communicate the why, then the how and the what will come. And that Simon Sinek, he has a book that's called Find Your Why. I'd also recommend one called Change is Good, You Go First by Mac Anderson. Ben?
We're out of time almost, but I do want to cover very quickly, and I know it'll be very quickly, but the surprise was that along with the grants and with the restaurant tax, we had unexpected revenues. We had people come into our door and said, I want to do a nature park 2 blocks from your downtown, and it's a wooded area, and if you'll help me, I'll put in $100,000. I said, you got a partner. And we did this nature park 2 blocks from the courthouse and had put a running stream and all that. We had a foundation who said, we have a piece of property that's close to the park. We'd like to give you the 5 acres and give you $70,000 for improvements, and we put this stainless steel, or not stainless steel, but powder-coated summer house on that we do outdoor weddings with. We had the oldest bank in our county come in and say, we would like to do a community project where you had a fire burn in the downtown at the stoplight, and they gave us $110,000, and we put in this fountain in this plaza area right at the main stoplight. We wanted to put art in the community, so we decided to do bronze sculptures of children, kind of a nostalgic Norman Rockwell kind of thing, and we did 7 pillars, and those were donated by individuals and corporations and strategically located. That's the only one that wasn't of a child, and it was faith, and we couldn't find anything that seemed to represent that, but this certainly represented that. And again, all paid for with donations, corporate and individual. This is our family. Unfortunately, we couldn't find one all together. We had to put one together. Is that poetic or what of our times? We have a war hero from the War of 1812. We raised $90,000 for the first 110% of life-size statue donated by individuals and corporations, and we put this bronze statue up. And then most recently, last fall, we celebrated the 15th anniversary. I say celebrate, commemorated the anniversary of the 9/11 disaster. They had made an offer to every fire department in the United States. If they wanted a piece of the artifact, they had to do a memorial, do it in front of their fire department, and pay tribute to their own first responders. This is our version. That's a box beam from the 91st floor of the North Tower, and we had a bronze flag and an angry American eagle on top, clutching that flag. That money for that project, a family came in, talked about all the things going on in our city and said, we want to partner with you, and said, we want to pay tribute to my father who used to be a coal mine operator in this county. He lived in the adjoining county, but we want to pay tribute to him. And they said, how much is this project? And we said, we just got the estimate from the bronze sculptor. It's going to be maybe $110,000. And he said, if you all allow us to pay tribute to him in a small way, we'd like to partner with you. And I'd heard that from the guy on the nature park, and I said, what do you mean by partner? And he said, if you'll let us pay tribute to him in a small way. And he looked at her and said, do you mind if I round it up? And she said, no. And he said, we're in for $110,000 paid for. And we did that last September. We had citizens nominate us for the coolest small town in America, and I think this was in 2013. And we were beat out by 2 or 3 other communities, all of which are adjacent to a metropolitan area, so they had a lot of people could vote for them. Ours is not adjacent to any of them, and we came in 4th in that contest. And then, as was mentioned, we've been in Southern Living. I think I'm out of time, but God has been blessing us. He kept His word 11 years ago, and He did it with people that He's brought our way, and with all that He's brought in our revenues to make things happen. You can do that in your community. Just don't tell me why, just tell me how.
That's right. Good job.
Thank you.